Hello everyone, and welcome to Weird Who. In the wide, ever-expanding realm of the Whoniverse, a fair share of oddities are bound to exist across a variety of mediums. This time we journey back to 2003, Doctor Who's 40th anniversary year. We had a brand new retrospective documentary, the conclusion of the VHS range, and the growth of its successor in DVDs, and perhaps the most exciting news of all came in September, that Doctor Who would be returning to BBC One at a primetime slot on Saturday nights, to be helmed by one of the most talked about creatives of the day, Russell T Davies. With all this excitement, perhaps it seemed appropriate that Doctor Who would get a feature at that year's Children in Need charity telethon, to be broadcast in November 2003. Would fans get a glimpse of the new series? A reveal perhaps of the new Doctor or companion? Oh no. Instead, they would get a parody crossover with one of the biggest programmes on television at the time.
This is not a game for slackers. There are no gimmies, no do-overs, no lifelines, no hints. You play as a team, but be ready to betray everyone to be rich. The weak of will, the unsteady, the ones who make excuses, all will leave with nothing. And if you fail, I will tell the whole world you are the weakest link. Goodbye.
The Weakest Link is a game show that first launched in the UK back in 2000. Hosted by Anne Robinson, her steely and often quite rude demeanour perfectly captured the attention of viewers, serving as one of the many examples of how television was taking more of a sharp and nasty edge as it entered the new millennium. Now, for any fans of The Weakest Link, what you're about to see today does not feature Anne Robinson. However, what it does feature is the superb cast of popular comedy show Dead Ringers, some rather dilapidated monsters, and even a couple of past Doctors. So sit back, relax, and prepare yourself.
It's me, Anne Robinson. It's time to play the weakest Doctor Who character.
Now, given that this is a send-up of both Doctor Who and The Weakest Link, you might have guessed that the questions asked by our pseudo-Anne here will all have a Who twist, and you'd be absolutely right. Let's start with the fourth Doctor, played here by John Culshaw.
Where do previous Doctor Who bodies go after they've regenerated?
To Cleethorpes, to pantomime, with the Chuckle Brothers.
Correct.
Okay, I'll give you something, that joke is unironically funny. We do get some genuine Who trivia thrown in there, which this poor Cyberman does answer correctly, but Anne has other ideas.
What evil alien intelligence invaded the planet Earth using the London Underground?
The Yeti.
No, the correct answer is Ken Livingstone.
And then we have the Sea Devil. Oh boy, what happened here? I think we can all agree that as iconic as the original Sea Devil design and costumes were, this one just looks sad. I completely appreciate that they probably grabbed this last minute and weren't too fussed as to the state of it, but by God, this is what people were laughing about when it came to Doctor Who back then, wasn't it?
Doctor Who was for a time accompanied on his travels by a lovable companion who only came up to his knees and whose name was...
The companion you are referring to, Mistress Robinson, is me, K9.
No, the correct answer is Bonnie Langford.
Whoa, hey, we will not accept any Bonnie Langford slander on this channel, thank you very much. Keep slaying, you scream queen. Hey, it's Colin Baker, who I must say, after nearly 20 years of first donning that coat, still looked pretty damn good in it. Props to them getting out his original costume again, rather than just slap a random dash of things together to try and approximate it. Although the gag attempted here...
What green has 6 legs and 1 huge eye?
Do you know, Anne, I don't know.
No, neither do I, but it's crawling up your leg, I'm afraid.
No, that's Arthur. Leave him.
Sorry.
Arthur.
Doctor!
I don't know what happened, but the camera is all over the place, and without actually seeing what's being referred to crawling up old Sixie's leg, it all just falls a bit flat, and I think this audience in some parts of this skit agree. But on the plus, we have another classic Doctor playing today, it's Sylvester McCoy, who also looks great rocking his original outfit and umbrella after all these years. Though the question he has, whoa boy, there's a lot to unpack here.
What do you call the misshaped creatures who spend their lives nearly motionless in total isolation, avoiding direct light and only communicating electronically with members of their own species?
The Vervoids from the planet Margoran.
No, the correct answer is Doctor Who fans.
Yes. The old Doctor Who fans are reclusive weirdos who don't talk to real people gag. Whilst it may technically be true to some extent, it isn't reflective of all of us. Right? Also, just to be clear, the Vervoids are great. We stan. Our last player is a Sontaran, who seems fairly intelligent for his kind, except like the poor Cyberman, he gets absolutely shafted by Anne.
Sontaran, name one thing that the surfaces of every planet in the galaxy have in common.
They are all capable of sustaining life, even if it is only at microscopic levels.
No, the correct answer is they all look suspiciously like a disused quarry in Dorset.
And now something a little more risque.
When entering the TARDIS for the first time, companions were always astonished by the size of what?
Well, my good woman, obviously you are talking about the inside of my TARDIS,
No, I most certainly am not.
Oh boy. Gotta love a good old sexual innuendo. God, this reeks of 2003. But brace yourselves for what is perhaps my favourite interaction of this whole sketch.
Cyberman,
Bank.
you've got nothing to bank, you glorified jug-eared tea-cozy.
Curses.
After a rather awkward last question, round one is over, where the team have banked £50, though I'm not sure how or even when this occurred.
Bank.
Nevertheless, as is customary in the weakest link, all must vote to decide who will be struck off, in this case, as the weakest character. Even the continuity announcer gets into the spirit of things by slagging off the monsters.
Statistically speaking, all the monsters were the weakest link, because not only did they get no questions right, but they're all made out of papier-mâché and tinfoil by someone who watched far too much Blue Peter.
After everyone reveals who they voted for, Anne drills some of them for their choices.
Sontaran, you voted for the Sea Devil. Why?
Because, Anne, I don't like the look of them.
When questioning the Cyberman, he gives a rather interesting response.
Cyberman, you voted for the Sontaran. Why?
He's got a head the shape of a Christmas pudding with an exhaust pipe in his neck, and I'm like I'm really scared.
Again, I can't emphasise just how 2003 that sounded. However, when questioning the fourth Doctor on his voting choice, we get what is perhaps the most Doctor Who fan response in the world.
Doctor, you voted for the Doctor. Why?
Because I want to know how it feels to be Michael Grade.
Right.
Now tell me, dear viewer, what average audience member who hasn't seen or engaged with Doctor Who in, let's say, 20 years is going to understand that reference? But hey, from a fan perspective, I actually quite like the joke. And you know Michael Grade would too. Ultimately, it's the Sontaran that bites the dust, and Anne summarises that she is in fact the Master. Wait, what?
Terry, I'm afraid that none of these monsters are really scary enough. They could learn a thing or two from the Master. Me.
With the skit wrapping up, the hosts emerge to confront Anne, and we supposedly learn something very 18+ about the late great Terry Wogan.
He loves it. He loves being dominated.
Does he?
Loves it.
I'm even more scary when I'm nice, so just watch out.
Be as strict as you like.
And as I try and erase that comment from my mind, that brings us to the end of our Weird Oddity today. In summary then, was this skit a success? Well, I'd say sort of. As a Doctor Who Weakest Link parody, it is hilarious in some places, with some of the cleverly written questions and jokes, and some of the hilarious asides from all involved. But I personally find a lot of awkward moments in this too. Lines that don't get the laughs they should, a bit of stilted delivery in places, and a sense that this was all thrown together at the very last minute. Which it very well could have been, and if so, kudos. This probably didn't do any great wonders for the perception of Doctor Who in the early 2000s, a cheap relic of the past that featured silly monsters who couldn't even scare the youngest of audiences. Thankfully, when the show did return in the spring of 2005, that warped perception was shattered in the most spectacular fashion. As if by chance, Anne herself would appear in that first series in a slightly more robotised form, but boy, did it leave an impression.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
So much so that the android would cameo briefly in what would be yet another collaboration between Doctor Who and the Weakest Link, though the robot was quickly defeated by a more powerful lookalike.
I don't think so. I think we'll do that again. Welcome to a special edition of The Weakest Link.
So sure, it's not the best Doctor Who parody skit there's ever been, but if anything, by featuring on such a mainstream television event like Children in Need, it would get the programme into the public conversation once again. It did so in 1983 with The Five Doctors, with Dimensions in Time in 1993, which of course is canon, and so for 2003, this. And I'm afraid out of these 3 collaborations, I only have one thing to say to this skit.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Thank you all for watching this episode of Weird Who. I've been Adam Martin, and I'll see you next time, hopefully with less of a sore throat, for another trip in the TARDIS.